Welcome to our podcast, Being a Digital Leader, the good, bad and ugly of digital transformation. I'm sure everyone's heard a lot about digital transformation, and unless you've done it, it can be quite scary and seem difficult to conquer. That's why we've set up this podcast, so that we talk to people who have been there, done that. And not only do we hear about how they did it and what they did, but how they felt doing it. Let's begin. My name is Simon Holden. I'm the Hub Exec for Scotland and Yorkshire, and I'll be your host for today. And today I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Stuart Walters, CIO for Parcel2Go.
Hello.
And James Locker, Club Exec at Digital. Today we'll be talking about the journey to becoming a technology-focused business. So let's jump in. Stuart is a commercially focused and innovative executive leader and chief information officer with a background in financial services, travel and e-commerce. Experienced in building and running multi-skilled onshore and offshore technology organisations and supplier relationships. With a powerful combination of a technical background and 20 plus years of senior executive experience, Stuart has the vision tempered with an understanding of the art of the possible to lead teams in today's tech-centric world. Very impressive, Stuart.
Thank you.
I'm expecting a lot from today. James is a club exec at Digital and is a people and commercially focused leader in digital with more than 15 years experience driving cultural and transformational change in high growth organisations. He has worked in professional services for the last 10 years and has a background in delivery leadership in a number of different markets and industries, including media and gaming, financial services, utilities and commodities. Equally impressive, James.
Thank you very much, Simon. Great to be here. Thank you.
Good stuff. All right. Stuart.
Yes.
We'd love to hear a bit about Parcel2Go and how you came to find yourself there.
Yeah, sure. I started off with a call from a search company, as lots of these things do. So I sort of learned a bit more about the opportunity and just was interested in where I hadn't really come across Parcel2Go, if I'm honest, and I was interested in where it sat in the sort of value chain of logistics. I thought it was quite an interesting sort of e-commerce related business that was clearly sort of geared with the growth in e-commerce, in the sort of global growth as well as UK growth. And so that interested me. Obviously, I've got an e-commerce background. So so I had a discussion with the then CEO, James Greenbury, and it was actually during lockdown. So my interview with James was on a park bench in Cheltenham.
Sounds like you
social distance. It looked a bit weird, two men of a certain age on a park bench. But anyway, so we had our first sort of socially distanced chat about it. And I just thought it was a very interesting proposition. The company had grown extremely quickly. And high growth companies kind of interest me. So I think tech can play a really important role in high growth businesses. So and that was it wasn't exactly that place that we found Parcel2Go. So those conversations went on and rest is history, as they say. So.
And now you're there. What is it that you love about what you do? What is it? What's great about the job that you have?
Something that's always really rewarded me is being part of a business that has a sort of strong place in its value chain. Has a strong value proposition in its marketplace, whatever that is, whether that's financial services, travel, I don't really care, as long as it's got a valuable role to play. One that's experiencing growth, but one that has not yet maybe completely leveraged technology or data, where there's real opportunity to take this fundamentally sound business and say, well, let's take it to the next level. Let's really leverage some, whether it's software engineering, whatever it is, to actually really, take it on to its next growth phase. So that's what I saw in Parcel2Go, and that's what's happening.
Okay, I'm going to bring you in shortly, James. Don't worry, I'm not ignoring you.
Absolutely not, no problem.
So when you started the journey in terms of Parcels2Go and taking it to be a technology-focused business. In terms of, if we use the framework of good, bad and ugly, in terms of the journey there, what was good that you really wanted to keep already there? What was bad, which maybe is a bit harsh, but what, that you wanted to kind of get rid of and jettison, and what needed to really work?
So what was really strong, it is still strong about the business, is everybody's really detailed understanding of the mechanics of the business, how it makes money, because it's actually quite a complicated business. There's lots of players in the logistics and sort of parcel delivery space, and we've all heard of the big couriers, but there are lots of other sort of players, sort of noses in the trough, so to speak. But so it's quite an intermediary focused business, end to end, and everyone there really knows how it works, and that's sort of easier said than done.
Yeah.
But including the tech guys. So I worked in another business where the tech guys know the tech, but they haven't got a huge sort of contextual awareness of the business. That's not the case at Parcel2Go. So we've got some people who really get it, and that's very, very powerful. And I think that's a huge strength of ours, is that we have those people who know almost the commercials of the business and the tech side of the business. So that's a great combination, very powerful. And I think to sort of digitally transform any business, you need both those things. Right, it's super important. So that's definitely the good. As I've said, we have volume. We play a valuable part in the sort of value chain. I think sort of bad was no real sort of sense of prioritization across the business in terms of delivery. Right, loads of things they wanted, loads of opportunity and things to do. Most of them, valuable, but no real sense of sort of roadmap or priority. So the tech team were. There was a lot of context switching going on. This week's priority one was maybe different to last week's or next week's. So I think allowing people to focus on something and actually do it end to end and deliver it was a high priority need. People were getting quite sort of punch drunk with just constantly switching. So that needed to change. I think the ugly was not much written down, a lot of stuff in people's heads. Absolutely the result of a fast-growing business. Classic sort of entrepreneur, owner-operated business as it originally was. Grew very quickly. There just wasn't time to do all the sort of nice software engineering things. Everything just had to be delivered and run and cope with volume. So I think quite understandably, the documentation, if you like, or the just writing a few bits down had taken a back seat. Yeah.
It's really, really interesting. There's a couple of bits in there that I think certainly resonate in terms of problem statements that we encounter of working with various clients, and it's certainly not unique to Parcel2Go by any stretch, and certainly not unique to the industry. We find that across multiple markets and areas of which we work, and prioritization is the word that comes up an awful lot. How do we prioritize, though? There's one thing that there's sort of a jungling of priority and people working on different things and context switching and so on and so forth. But I think what it stems back to when digital transformation is done really well is being very clear on how to prioritize. And I think the way in which you do that correctly is having communication and a consistent communication that's being driven from the very top. So it's not the very top person that's having to make that priority call all the time. Anybody can make that priority call because it ties in, it aligns, it's got a thread result back to what enables us to hit what it is that we're all trying to achieve together. And I think that's one of the key things when we talk about transformation, everybody facing the same way, and prioritization then becomes really easy. And I think the other thing that really struck a chord with me there, Stuart, as well, is in terms of what you referenced, the ugly thing, things being stuck in people's head. And again, that is certainly not unique.
No.
And we talk a lot about what that really means. And we talk about that in terms of knowledge, and we almost term knowledge as being a really powerful thing. And it is powerful if it's used in the right way. If people cling on to knowledge, then it becomes detrimental to the business. And that willingness to share knowledge and impart knowledge on others is where you get a real strength of business. And that comes with cultural evolution towards the transformation that you're trying to reach. And I think that's been crucial on your journey as well.
It has. I think, the prioritization piece it was harder than it sounds.
They always are, aren't they?
And it's easy to say we prioritise commercially, which we do, which most people do, right? it's either something strategically important for the sort of 3-year plan or 5-year plan or whatever, or it's just worth a lot of money. We want to do it. We're a very, very commercially focused business, as many are. So that sounds all very straightforward. Let's look at the business case and easy, right? Because it's not that easy.
No.
And I don't think anyone's perfect at it. And I think chasing perfection on that probably isn't sensible. Perfection being the sort of enemy of the good and all that. But I think we're in a reasonably good place. I think what we've really done with Anne, which has been central to this, has been to put in a sort of what we call ways of working, some process. Everyone hates the word process, but a framework. Actually, it's probably a better word, where we can reference certain points which we need to get to in our prioritization process, which everyone understands. Everyone's been taught about and everyone's learned about. We say we need to get to this step, and then we go on to the next step. And if as long as we get to those steps, and they're simple, and there aren't too many of them, then we know we're in a good place. It's something everyone can reference in the prioritization process, and that works pretty well for us. And I think we've really tailored it to our business. It has absolutely not out of the box. It's absolutely sort of bespoke to us, to our size, to our culture, everything else. We didn't want to become a sort of FTSE 100 business overnight in terms of sort of bureaucracy, and that definitely wouldn't have worked. But what we have is a framework which we can use now to drive prioritization, and it works pretty well.
Yeah.
There's always things that creep around the edge, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
life. Life gets in the way, kind of thing. It's a framework.
No, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're talking about the journey, and I presume tech has been quite a key part of that journey at Parcel2Go. What are the changes you've had to make to tech? What's the strategy you did for that? Why and how do you do it in terms of the platform you've built and how it's evolved?
So I guess we had three things we were going after. One was the ways of working piece, which I've talked about, to make sure the whole business was aligned in terms of how we were prioritised, the roadmap we were creating, sharing the roadmap. Everyone knew what was coming and what was current, etc., etc. So that's really important. The ways of working was important. Two was we just had a backlog of work we needed to get through.
Okay.
So we needed more bums on seats, essentially, to help us do that, and some skills, some particular skills we're after. And third was, I guess, imparting some of those skills to our own people. So those are the three critical parts, really, of the and relationship. Was the process, the skills transfer, and just helping us get through a lot of work. And I think the other piece on top of that, which the resource allowed us to do, was we knew we had some platform engineering work to do. So, as I say, the business grew. It was growing very quickly, especially during COVID. COVID saw record growth because everyone was stuck at home and sending and receiving parcels. So absolutely momentous growth. And of course, the volumes on the platform were increased hugely. Plus some specific white label deals we put in place for some UK couriers. Couriers have generated huge volume because they're all done on the common platform. So we were in a place where we had massive volume growth, and the platform work, engineering work, had taken a back seat, right? So we had some database, not challenges, but they would have become challenges if we hadn't addressed them. We had quite a lot of old code which we needed to get rid of, replace, and some refactoring of code as well. So, and again, none of that had really been given any sort of time in court, love and attention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we need to do that. So we have been doing that for the last 12 months. Yeah. As a sort of ring-fenced part of the team, we've said, right, this is the platform, what we need to do. It's not everything. I'm not a believer in re-platforming, so to speak. I don't think those projects really work because they're always too big. But we zeroed in on some specific parts of our platform we knew needed that love and attention. Otherwise, we would have got into performance issues and volume issues. So that's what we focused on. And we've made a lot of progress in the last 12 months to deliver those specific pieces and to deliver some tooling, actually, which will make our future growth and expansion easier. So we want to create some. We want to drive more with data, not with code. So that's a big part of our strategy, is to create sort of softer, configurable sites rather than coding everything from the ground up every time. So so platform is about volumetric capability. It's about sort of currency of software, and it's about some tooling. Really important part.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, when we think back, looking back in time, in sort of setting the partnership up between Parcel2Go and was about, we were very clear on what both sides wanted to achieve within that partnership, and the timeframes from which we wanted to achieve those set outcomes. And I think that was important for two reasons. One, that we set it up in that way, so we knew what we were trying to do, where we were trying to head. But secondly, how we were able to communicate that as well. So all the people that were involved in all the changes that you've just spoken about, Stuart, there, knew why it was happening, knew that the business needed to evolve, it needed to grow, it needed to grow at pace, and that was the reasons for doing those, so that they could get behind it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I don't think we should ever downplay how critical that was, or how well it was done. Because it really sets things up from the very, very beginning for something that looks towards success.
Yeah,
and maybe let's expand on that a bit then, that cultural side, and so that need to take people on the journey. And it's kind of easy to say, but how did you actually do that? How did you bring the team with you? Were you clear about those kind of stepping stones to get there? How did you start the process?
So
big question.
Yeah, if I can remember it. My first couple of weeks at the company, I got the tech team in a room, and I said basically, what do you need? What are the pinch points? What are the friction points? Well, what can make your life kind of better, happier, whatever, easier? And one of the resounding answers was more people.
Okay.
So we just haven't got enough people to do everything that's being asked of us, and prioritization. So we cover the prioritization bit, I think. And those are the two resounding wants and frustrations in the tech team and obviously they're closely allied, right? The two things. So then we started to talk about numbers of people. So and we arrived at sort of, I can't remember the exact number now, but I think we said it was sort of 12 or 14 or 16 or something like that would be ideal. And I think all the time those guys were thinking about just going out and hiring 10, 12, 14 more permanent members of staff, which wasn't really my sort of plan. So then I started talking about potential partnership, and then they started to get nervous. It was about their thoughts went to, oh, he's going to outsource everything. So it went completely, which was not surprising. And when I first started talking to And, I said, look, one of the most important things here, and I've done this in previous companies, is we've got to have technical respect we're to win technical respect from my team on day one, literally day one. You've got less than 2 days to do this.
Yep.
First impressions are everything here, absolutely everything, and that is definitely true. Otherwise, you run out of road very quickly, and their willingness to adopt, my guys' willingness erodes very quickly. But that worked well, I have to say. I remember we had 2 cloud engineers from And working with our cloud team, and we had a lot to do in our cloud environment, and that worked very well. I remember us talking to our internal chap at the time, James, and he said, actually, these guys are very good, and he's a really good technical guy, and so I thought that's praise indeed, and that was kind of the start of it. And then we slowly onboarded software developers, software engineers, and it worked very well. I think there were seldom do we have to either swap anybody out or move anybody around. It worked better than I actually thought it would.
Okay.
I thought there'd be more bumps in the road. So we started with in a very sort of nervous place on the part of the internal team, and we ended up in a very good place. And then we got to a place where they said, "Well, do And really have to go?" And we kind of like these guys, and they're great to work with. They're real humans. They're real people. They're not just contractors. And the blended team thing in my view, was the only way this would ever work. Right? I did not want separate teams because that just creates an exclusivity and a separation. It's just so unhelpful.
Yeah.
I remember at the time the board, because we had to obviously put the whole partnership and transaction through the board, and we were talking it through, and I said, so obviously And are going to be in separate teams, and we can measure their output and what's our return on our dollar, every dollar spent with And that's well, actually that's not how it's going to work, because that might give us an easily measurable
from
piece.
a procurement perspective,
right?
Yeah,
Exactly. But actually, it just will get very little value out of it. It'll be very disruptive. We'll have us and them for the next 2 years. It'll be so unhelpful. So that's not what we did. So that the blended team piece is essential, absolutely essential. And that winning that technical respect, I think it's the right term, is also central to success.
Yeah, and I think when those teams land, there's an immediacy around what they need to do, and respect, absolutely. And I think respect probably comes in two forms. There's one, a credibility form, and making sure these guys are credible at what they do, and hopefully, we've showcased that, and there's sort of in abundance within our teams that we were able to bring in. There's a second thing in making sure that we do that in an entirely non-threatening way, because naturally when we're walking in and new through the door with clients, there is a potentially formed cynical concept as to why those people are here, and you touched on it a little bit. And we're going to offshore everything. These guys are here to take our jobs, and again that's not uncommon. No. So we have to make sure that we bring not only the right technical people in, but the right cultural people into our organisations that are able to blend with your teams correctly. So, and that's where the partnership is so important as well, from a value and principles perspective, in terms of recruiting the right sort of people on both sides of the partnership. And again, I think that's one of the things that we got really right in terms of the people that were brought into the engagement.
I think I've got to give full credit to my team as well here, because yes, the end team did it absolutely correctly, but the willingness to adopt it, I think, was actually high.
Definitely.
And you put yourself in their shoes. I mean, I was a new boy as well. I've been there 2 years, right? So it's just over. So some of these guys have built this stuff from almost day one. Right? Some of them actually from day one, and they built it, looked after it, grown it, etc. And they felt obviously a huge sense of responsibility for it, and it was kind of theirs, and I completely get that. And then I was waiting on all these new guys, and they were understandably nervous, but I think they very quickly saw that it was the right thing to do. It answered our resource question, which was one of their first wants, right? So it kind of ticked that box. So it just worked, but. Full credit, I think, to both sides actually making it work. It's definitely a two-way street.
That's what a partnership's about, isn't it?
It is absolutely right.
And I think the other thing that we perhaps just didn't touch upon is the language shift that and I know we speak about, Stuart, in terms of the recognition that it might have previously been an IT department to one that becomes certainly more tech-led. And I think I quite remember the phrasing that we use within the strategic intent of the partnership, but certainly it's on that journey to be more tech-led, and doing things like this today, start to point towards that in terms of talking about that process, talking about the journey, talking about future tech that enables the greater good and the growth, and which is great. Just those small, subtle language changes that you don't realise you're doing. It becomes a subconscious thing. But when you pinpoint them, those are what make the real difference sometimes.
Yeah, so I say we're moving from being a business which happens to have an IT department to a tech-centric, tech-led business, if you want to call it. And that's a big shift. And I never used the term IT. IT is a 90s term, and everyone at P2G would tell you how obsessed I am with that. But I think it's moving from that order-taking environment, right, where the guys in tech are order takers, to actually being part of the business and actually being part of creating, inventing, and delivering solutions. That sounds really kind of cliche, I know, but it is about that, and it's actually about also the business having at least some understanding of what it's like to build sometimes quite complicated software. I don't want everybody to be a software engineer, but at least having an understanding of the process has helped. Not everybody is interested in it. I don't expect them to be, but at least to be aware of it, I think is actually really helpful for the whole business.
Can we explore that a bit, Stuart, in terms of how welcoming have your peer group, the execs, kind of been to the transformation that you've taken your team through, and how that's impacting the business?
So I think what everyone loves is the roadmap. So that's basically our sort of master Gantt charts, call it that. I know Gantt charts don't really work in an agile world, but everyone still loves a Gantt chart.
We'll delete that.
Especially stakeholders, right? Agile is a difficult thing to manage with stakeholders, but so everyone loves the sense of visibility that gives us. And that's what it's all about. It's about, okay, this is what we're working on. The board love it. Everyone just looks at it and goes, okay, I get it. That's after that. And, it's pretty simple stuff, right? Yeah. But that didn't exist before. So it's important to know that. So that's probably, from a sort of visibility, sort of crowd-pleasing point of view, one of the key things, simple as it sounds. But, of course, to get to that, there's a lot of work that, delivers that asset. So I think that was important in sort of winning over my peers and the exec team and other key stakeholders in the business. I think there was resistance to the ways of working to start with, and we went round the block a few times on iterating how the process would work, how detailed it was, how involved everyone needed to be in it. And there was a big gap in the business before I joined, and that we didn't have any sense of business analyst or product analyst. That role just did not exist. Right? Okay. So there was nothing that sat between a commercial leader and a software developer. Nothing. Okay. So that was a direct conversation, which, mostly, often, if not all the time, was a very high-level conversation. And software engineers or developers were expected just to sort of understand what the detail or make it up, basically. Of course, half the time it was wrong. So we ended up building stuff more than once, and it was frustrating for both parties. Right, it just didn't really work. So, it did work because things were delivered, but we tended to focus on one or two things at a time. There was the sense of sort of multitasking across the team was very limited. Because everyone was trying to understand what it was they were trying to do, but the business just wanted them to start writing code. Right? So that was the ultimate measure of success. Are we writing code yet? So we introduced the product analyst through And. We had some very, very good PAs from And who really transformed that. They were a really key part of our ways of working, embedding in the business. Because business stakeholders, while they immediately sort of sat back a bit from the sort of process side of it. When the PAs came on board, they could see there were smart people who really got it and understood our business pretty quickly. They could see the value add that role brought to the business. It was huge because it completely just bridged this gap, right? Developers liked it because they suddenly knew that they were being given epics and stories to work with, which is, wow, this is great. And the business liked it because stuff was, it took a bit more time to tease out the detail. Once it was teased out and written down, they could kind of not sit back and do nothing, but there was a much higher chance that we were going to be successful. And we were, first time. So yes, there was a bit of process involved. I think that was immediately was a bit of a sort of sit back moment. But the value the PAs brought and our rate of success with building the right thing just proved very quickly it was the right thing to do.
I can imagine.
I think that's a general misconception, actually, not necessarily within the industry itself, but perhaps more outside the industry, that when we think about digital, we immediately think about engineers writing code. And all of those professional skills or behavioral skills, those analytical skills that sit around that ultimately make the code successful, we should never miss. And not just in terms of the end result, but the processes that you're going through during that period to win the trust of the people that may have been somewhat sceptical about the what you're about to embark on from the beginning, because they can start to see the results very quickly. You know? So yeah, definitely a misconception I think that we have more broadly.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah.
But as I say, we did have to iterate the ways of working a couple of times. I want to say, and that was actually a really good process to go through, because I guess expecting everyone to agree with the first iteration was just never going to happen, right? That's a big ask and unrealistic. And maybe
you probably actually want challenge there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that actually ended up being a really healthy. It's exactly what happened. And one particular, I'm going to mention Bev from Anne, because she was so dogged in her perseverance with this. It was really great to see.
Yeah.
She would never take no for an answer. She'd keep coming back. And having more and more workshops with people, hearing the feedback. She was great at taking feedback on board, feeding that into the next iteration, which would obviously be slightly different. And eventually, we got there. Yeah. And it didn't take a huge amount of time. Just took some effort from people, but we got to a good place. Yeah.
Brilliant. Stuart, you just mentioned the roadmap kind of in your previous answer. How are you delivering against that? Are you kind of halfway through, or is it a never ending? There's always stuff to do. Where are you in the journey?
Yeah, it's kind of a rolling beast, really. So we add sort of 6 or typically 2 quarters to it at a time. So we never really get to the end of it, which is a little bit soul destroying. But in terms of success of delivery against that, pretty well. Okay. Things jump in and get in the way, but the right things. So, if a big commercial opportunity comes in, which two have in the last 6 months, then the roadmap gets ripped up. We start again. Not start again. We adjust it.
Yeah.
But we have a process for doing that.
Yeah.
So that becomes essentially an exec discussion, and we say, well, this project's gonna get in front of almost everything else. Maybe not the platform work, but pretty much everything else, because it's so important commercially and strategically to us. We need to deliver it. It's a super powerful tool there, because we didn't have that before.
Yeah. You
just said, well, this new thing's priority 1, everything else can go to hell. Right? That it's not like that anymore. At least we know where everything else is going to be. We understand the impact this is going to have on everything else. So we move it out. So we adjust our plan accordingly. So now we have a device essentially for doing that, which is really important for us. So I think to answer your question, I'm not sure whether delivery against the roadmap is the right metric, because, as I say, opportunities arise, and we'd be kind of disappointed if they didn't. Yeah. Really. Yeah. So we want that to happen, but at least we have a device now for managing alongside that.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think when you think about a device, you almost think about a tool, and the tool's kind of defining the exec prioritization. If I can ask a question, if that's all right. I guess, how do you manage that from a people journey perspective, in that the priorities changed? We now have to back a new horse, almost. Yeah. How do you manage that?
So, I mean, through, I think, better communication. You would be the first answer to that. As I say, we have the everyone can see the roadmap and can understand it. So we have that as our sort of base of our conversation. But again, because everyone knows the business, we say, well, Project X has come along. It's a big UK brand. I won't mention any names. We haven't quite gone live with one of them yet. But everyone says, "Oh, okay. Well, that sounds interesting." I would say, "Well, actually, it is." And here's the outline numbers we expect.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people in the business have some equity in the business or some shares in the business, right? So everyone's sort of pulling in the same direction. And again, because everyone has an understanding of, as I said at the beginning, the mechanics and the sort of commercials of the business, everyone has that kind of empathy for, why wouldn't we do this? Yes. Right? Yep. This must be more important than the other projects that are on the roadmap. Yeah. While they're not, trivialized, this has to come first.
Sure.
Because if we decide not to go for it, somebody else is going to take it, and it'll never come back. Mm-hmm. So we just have to. I think that works well. And that's through, as I say, good comms, but also through everyone having an awareness of why we do what we do, and how we do it. So.
I think you inferred that you've kind of got a view of the roadmap kind of 2 quarters out broadly. Are there things that you can see that would appear on the roadmap 2-3 years out, which you're going to go, actually, I know at some point these are going to come through. It's just we've got to kind of deal with the here and now. I mean,
well, it's actually a 12-month roadmap, but
Okay.
we kind of we add to it probably every 2 quarters.
Okay.
So, but so answer your question is yes. We have some items on the roadmap which will not complete in the lifetime of that roadmap. They spill out into
Okay.
further periods. The platform work will be one of those because it's a long piece of work. But most things complete within the roadmap period. Because whether it's a white label site we're building or whether it's something we're doing for our own SME customers or our own P2G, Parcel2Go.com, they tend to be shorter pieces of work. And as we tool ourselves up better, which I referred to earlier, to sort of build the white label sites, then they should become shorter in duration in runtime. So, but yeah, most things complete. There's a few exceptions that don't. And in terms of the sort of strategic growth plan for the business, some of those things are not on the roadmap yet because they're either confidential or they're not set in stone yet. So yeah, they won't be on there yet.
is Gen AI kind of, there's a hot topic at the moment? Is that something that's factoring in your plans? Is that, or?
So one of the things James referred to earlier, which is how we sort of changed or started to change the culture, if you like, certainly the tech side of the business, is we ran a hackathon in August, 2-day hackathon in Anne's Leeds office, which is down the road from here actually, and took about half the team out. And
It's a big investment, isn't it?
It was, yeah, no, it was.
That's a commitment.
And everyone absolutely loved it. That's the first thing to say, which is really important. Probably the first one we'd done. I think have we done this at the second? I think first at that scale anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic of the hackathon was how can we use Gen AI to help our business?
Okay.
Very broad, whether that's cost reduction, whether it's revenue creation, whatever, it doesn't matter, or both. So that was the topic. So not necessarily just ChatGPT, but that was obviously what was central to it. And also not necessarily just a big sort of large language model. It could have been just some machine learning, right? And we had 3 very, very strong candidates come out of that, one of which we're going to present to the business very soon. One of which is a more of a back-end process piece with how we sort of dedupe tickets coming into our Jira environment, which should just save people a lot of time. So that's more of an efficiency gain. But the other 2, so there's one of which we're presenting soon, could be very impactful for a business. So it was super productive. And the guys came and actually presented the 3 things back to me 2 weeks ago in our new office in Bolton. And everyone absolutely loved it. The feedback was super positive. So we're definitely doing more of those. So it's very well facilitated by Anne. Thank you for that. And yeah, those sort of events where the teams work more in a more sort of fluid way, not on roadmap projects, something completely different, I want to do more of. It is an investment of time, as you rightly point out. So you can't do them, forever, but or too much. But they're really, really important. For morale, but also just gets people away from their desk for a little bit and talking to each other a bit more. And I think that was very, very beneficial. And the feedback was hugely positive. Yeah, everyone really liked it.
And I think that last point, I think there's something really, really important about that, because I think when we think about really successful companies, what they do is they don't just structure themselves on one particular aspect or facet of their organization. And I think by running things like hackathon days, couple of days in this instance, you're not just appeasing certain aspects of the technology that you're trying to harness, the client relationships that you have, the investments that you make in technological decision making, but you're investing in people, and that's fundamentally what those 2 days were about. And making it so that the organization becomes not only commercially viable, not only viable to the clients that it provides a service for, but provides a place that becomes a great place to work and people want to be there because they do great things, such as that. And I think that's the thing that came across me. I didn't play a huge role in it other than to provide some chocolates now and again. But
that
sounds very important.
but yeah, the bit where when I was present, adding to the rounds of chocolates that were available to people, there was a real sense of enjoyment. You know, I'd turned up just after lunch and lunch didn't happen. Nobody went out for lunch. They were just working because they wanted to meet these challenges and they were so ingrained in what they were doing. The conversation was flowing, the idea generation that was just taking place. And fundamentally, I think that's what people want to do. You know, they want to be challenged and they want to be creative and innovative in their thinking because that's what we come to work for. You know.
Well, I suppose I'm going to backtrack then in saying doesn't sound like it was a huge investment based on if there's an idea that's going to the board and the people engagement piece.
Yeah,
seems like almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I wasn't expecting that level of output from it. If I'm honest, I mean, I thought we might get one good idea. Not because I doubt the guys, but because it's the first one we've done. I thought maybe we'll need to sort of learn a bit from it. But actually, it was just the opposite to that. Yeah.
Right, 2 final questions then. One maybe slightly harder, one slightly easier. So kind of, it's not a test. What's the journey so far for you at Parcel2Go? What's the biggest lesson you've taken out?
I think the sort of hearts and minds piece probably around the ways of working. I think personally I'd underestimated how we'd need to iterate that. As I said, the iteration did work very well. I think that was, if I was doing this again, I would do more to maybe prepare people for that in the business before we actually started facing them with charts and pictures and sort of diagrams, things like that. Talk more about why we're doing it before we got into the what and how. I think that would have been that might have saved us a little bit of time on that. That would probably be in retrospect. Yeah, that was a big learning. I think also the level of benefit once you've got that in place that has to the business is huge. If anyone watching this is embarking or thinking about embarking on it, I would say don't hesitate because there will be upside. It might not all be completely painless, but if it was all painless, you're probably not doing enough. But I would say the benefits are tangible, especially in this kind of business, which was, as I say, very, very entrepreneurial. It's a real trading business, and it can really use tech to huge effect and data actually. And we needed to do this. I think that was, to me, that was very, very obvious. It was ripe for this kind of transformation. And also, will you ever actually? How do you know when you finish? I think is the other question. Yeah. You probably never will.
Yeah.
But a bit like building software, don't go for the 100% solution because it's real diminishing returns. Get to 80% and quit and move on to the next thing. As long as it's the right 80%.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, it's good. And I think you'll need support of everybody. Everybody's got a role to play in it. This is not a tech thing, right? Absolutely isn't. Everybody's got to understand it. We got to a place actually where I said, because before we had the ways of working in place, people didn't really know how to get stuff done. It was they'd lobby an exec member who would shout at people. And exactly, it wasn't really that. But now we've got to a place where I said, right, there's 3 ways to get software built at Parcel2Go, right? It's either on the roadmap, it's a small change for which is a process, right, which is very simple, or it's a bug fix. There is no 4th way of developing software at Parcel2Go. That's it. So everyone kind of gets that. Yeah. It's very simple, and it works. Yeah. As simple things often do. So, yeah.
No, good. I think to summarise, I think a theme that goes through all of what we've talked about is that hearts and minds in terms of taking people on the journey. Yeah. Technology is critical, data is critical, but if you don't take the people with you, you can't actually get the value out of it.
You can't leverage it. No,
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So final question then. So in and we have and titles, and I'm sure.
Because was that the hard one or the easy one?
Yeah, exactly. You can decide. You can decide. Okay. So and titles. So James is Sunderland fanatic, a big football fan. Mine is rugby nut. Very excited about the Rugby World Cup. If you were to have an and title, Stuart, what would yours be?
So I love boats. So yeah, probably. I don't know, boating aficionado or sailing aficionado, somewhere. I like any kind of boat actually, but yeah, I like being on the water. So
is this more with a sail or more with an engine? Or is it
both actually.
Yeah,
I don't really mind. I know there's this huge divide in that, which I know
divide.
very well. Yeah, I'm less sort of fussed about that. But I think they're very different, and they both have their good and bad side. But yeah, I just like being on the water.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, no, very good. Lovely job. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. That's everything for today for the good, the bad and the ugly of digital transformation. Thank you again, Stuart and James.
It's been a pleasure.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode to enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Digital is on a mission to close the digital skills gap. We do that through working with our clients to deliver digital transformation through better upskilling and reskilling.